All right, so we're live for the second Silverdale Business event. So this one is, well, it's hire right, or how to hire the right person. So today we've got Kayleen Martin from Ripple Recruitment. She's going to, well, we've actually got a pre-recorded one because of some technical issues yesterday. And she's going to be walking through her presentation about the whole hiring process. And then after that, we have Bronwen Newcombe from, well, she's the director at Davenports Law. And she's going to be basically going through the legal obligations and so forth for that sort of thing. So after that, you can pop some questions in the chat. Well, you can pop them in as we go. There's a chat box down the side there, and also a questions box, so you can pop any questions and that sort of thing in there, and we'll get to those at the end. Kayleen is in the chat, so she'll be able to answer them and pop her hand up and speak out if need be. But because of the technical issues yesterday, we pre-recorded it just to make sure that we got everything for you. So now that we've gone over a little bit of housekeeping, I'll jump straight into Kayleen's presentation. Just share my screen for you all.
Hello everyone, I'm Kayleen Martin and I'm the founder of Ripple, and it's a pleasure to present to you today. I'm looking forward to sharing some pro tips to help you hire the right person and improve your bottom line. But first I would like to get some feedback from you about how you feel when you think about. Hello everyone, I'm Kayleen Martin and I'm the founder of Hiring. So even though I'm not with you in person today, if you could still interact, that would be appreciated. So I'm wanting to build a word cloud that will illustrate how you feel when you think about hiring. So on your smartphones or the device you're watching from, could you please log into www.menti.com and then type in the code 99038613. You can see all that information on the screen now. When you go in there, there'll be 5 positions for you to write a word that describes how you feel when you think about hiring. So if I can just give you a few seconds to do that for me, I would really appreciate your feedback. We know from previous talks that hiring is not the preferred activity of a business owner or business leader, and it's certainly not the reason that you are went into business, unless of course you're a recruiter or HR person like myself. You'd much rather be performing the functions that you went into business for. I'll just give you a few more seconds. Okay, so feel free to continue doing that, and I certainly look forward to looking at the results, so thank you very much for that. So let me start by telling you a little bit about Ripple, what we do, and let me along the way share some pro tips with you to help you recruit and hire. So Ripple is a local business here on the Hibiscus Coast. We have specialists, however, throughout the North Island, and we serve clients throughout New Zealand. So recruitment is one of 4 divisions. We also offer Ripple Business Advisory, Ripple Women's Support, and Ripple Community Aid. And you can see these at our website, www.ripple.net.nz. So within the recruitment division, there are 5 key services that we offer. We have our recruiting agency, our applicant database management, human resources and health and safety, interview coaching, and immigration advisory. So I'm going to touch on all of those briefly with you today, and I'm sure you'll go some helpful tips as well. So first of all, let's look at recruiting. So recruiting costs money, time and resources. And Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, said, I'd rather interview 50 people and not hire anyone than hire the wrong person. So Jeff said this because he knows the massive cost of making a poor or bad hiring decision. So it costs up to 200% of a vacancy's gross annual remuneration to hire. And the cost of a bad hire can actually exceed this. So how is 200% calculated? So if we look at an administrator earning $45,000 per annum, her replacement or his replacement cost is up to $90,000. And this is not inclusive of their salary. So the aim for the employee retention rate is five years. So you aim to retain an employee for 5 years, but you should plan for 3. So over 3 years, that is an investment of $30,000 per annum for that one placement. The costs are hard or seen and organic or hidden. So your seen costs are obvious. They are your resources preparing job descriptions, company policies, job adverts, collecting, collating, screening, applicants and interviewing and so on. The list actually goes on. Your hidden costs are the impact on the other team members, reduced customer satisfaction, reduced productivity, rookie mistakes, and that list goes on. If you get the hiring process right, you can expect to retain a hire for 3 to 5 years, as I said before. But if you get it wrong, you can expect to have them move on within 3 to 12 months. So that 200% spread out over just 12 months is a massive cost to any business. Okay, so Benjamin Franklin said that time is money. Waste it now, pay for it later. So let's take a look at that literally with recruitment. So it takes 48.5 human hours and 8 interviews to make one hire, whether that be a good hire or a bad hire. So that's 25 hours of job posting and applicant reviewing, 4 hours of pre-screening and shortlisting, 12 hours of interview, 7.5 hours of reference checking and completing the hiring functions. So imagine if you don't get your hiring right first time, you will probably have to make this investment all over again. And there are very few SME businesses that can absorb that level of cost easily. So unfortunately, some of you may have not been imagining that scenario, but you may have lived that scenario. It is a very common story, and one reason why business leaders use a recruitment agency. Okay, so what does Ripple or recruiting with Ripple look like? So we provide boutique recruitment, human resource, health and safety, and immigration advisory services. And we focus on exceptional outcomes for all the parties involved. So some of the outcomes we will deliver are job description and company policy preparation and delivery, employment agreement services through trusted professionals like Bronwen Newcombe, who you will be talking with soon, vacancy advertising design, job applicant screening, potential new hire interviewing, competency and screening testing, so for example, drug testing or Microsoft Suite knowledge, candidate reference checking, contract negotiation, it's an art, onboarding strategies, performance appraisal designs and strategies. So being a business owner or leader does not magically equip you with the tools to know and handle all the intricacies of recruiting, hiring, and human resource responsibilities. So we are here to either wholly do the job for you or to fill in your expertise or your gaps in expertise. Right, so I mentioned earlier Ripple Community Aid. So there are two components in this division that relate to recruiting. So I'll cover those with you. So we have, first of all, our 50 below service, and then our first and next chance service. So the 50 below service is based on my belief that small businesses need access to professional, affordable recruitment services. So I developed the 50 below service, which is currently exclusively available to approved Rodney District businesses. It's available for positions paying less than $50,000 per annum, hence 50 below, and our fee is just $950 plus GST for that service. It's not a modified service to what we normally provide, it is full service. A typical recruitment fee for that service would be around about $5,000 plus GST. Then we have our first and next chance service. So again, this is based on my belief that everyone who wants to be employed deserves the dignity of employment. And we recognise that there are some members of our communities that are vulnerable job seekers. So we work with local businesses, government and private agencies to provide these job seekers with positive, inclusive and supportive workplaces that nurture strong, healthy work relationships. So if you are interested in providing a great opportunity for a job seeker in need, and you're prepared to give someone a break, we would love to hear from you. Just to find out more is absolutely fine as well. Okay, the next service that we have, which is exclusive to us to the best of my knowledge, is our applicant database management service. So it's common for SME businesses to handle their own recruitment needs, but one resource they often speak of not having is an adequate means of handling applicants. So those might be applicants who express interest in working with them throughout the year at random times, or they might be applicants responding to a vacancy advertisement. So Ripple offers you the opportunity to hire a petitioned database management space within our system. Here you can capture, store and access your applicant records 24/7. It's a simple and effective tool for every business that employs people. So records management is knowing what you have, where you have it, and that it is quickly accessible. And that is what we provide through our applicant database management service. Moving on to human resources. So human resources isn't a thing we do, it's the thing that runs our businesses. And that's a quote from Steve Wynn of Wynn Resorts. And it's absolutely true. So the services we can offer, we can handle management and staff HR queries. It's quite a list here. So advise and train managers on recruitment and selection strategies, advise on career development and training options, negotiate terms and conditions of employment, review and update job descriptions, review and update HR policies, making sure that they are kept in line with current legislation, and we can advise on a conflict resolution. So health and safety, we also have some services in this area. We can develop policies and procedures to minimise workplace hazards. We can identify hazards and risks that may affect the health of workers, and we can educate and train staff in managing workplace risks. All right, interview coaching. So not everybody innately knows how to interview. So we provide one-on-one and team coaching, interview with intent sessions. Now these are for management and leaders, anybody who's going to be interviewing potential hires. So in these sessions, you will learn face-to-face and Zoom techniques. You will learn about interview preparation and areas that may have boundaries and limitations that you need to be mindful of. Scheduling interviews, best practice, next steps, and interview follow-ups. Soon we will be releasing a digital audio-visual version of this training as well for you to purchase. So immigration advisory, this is a very current topic at the moment, as you know. We know that our immigration practices are changing, and with that, there will be company employer accreditation, company employer accreditation effective from November 2021. So there'll be amendments to the work visa suite, and over a given period of time, 27,000 businesses will be working to comply so that they can retain their existing visa holding team numbers. And I recommend that you begin the process now. So if you have or intend to have visa holding workers, please contact me, Kayleen at ripple.net.nz, and we can look after that for you. So start now, because with 27,000 businesses wanting to comply, there will be a bottleneck at some point, and it's expected to be in the traditional busy period between November and early next year. So can't stress highly enough, start now. Okay, so just to wrap up, remember that reducing your staff turnover and improving your bottom line is primarily achieved by hiring the right person first time, every time, and retaining top talent. So Ripple is a local business. We provide exceptional services. So I encourage you to take advantage of what we have to offer. And you can search us up at ripple.net.nz. But lastly, before you go, or before I finish, could I ask you to just interact with me one more time? If you could go back to Menti, but this time enter a new code, 62830049, and in there are some scales statements about what action, if any, you intend to take after I have spoken with you today. So unfortunately, I can't take your questions directly, but Matt will record those for you, and I can come back to you individually or as a group, however Matt decides, and answer those for you. Otherwise, I really look forward to having a chat with you about meeting your needs, whatever they may be. Obviously, our services cover a broad spectrum. I look forward to talking with you in the future, and I hope that you enjoy Bronwen's tips and tricks. Thank you.
Awesome. That was actually quite insightful, which is great. It's exactly what we wanted. I did see a couple of questions come up, and I know Kayleen said in that last part of her video there that she can't answer them directly, but she has been able to get on, so she is in the chat, and we'll hopefully be able to answer them in the chat there. So I saw a couple of questions come through. So if you get the chance, Kayleen, if you want to answer those in the chat, that would be great. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Bronwen to talk about the legal aspect of hiring new staff.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. And that was a really insightful presentation, Kayleen. So I know you're listening, so thank you very much. I got a lot out of that too. And I'd be interested to see what the word cloud looks like from the attendees, words they put in around recruitment. Certainly the words that I put in with things like feeling stressed, overwhelmed, that I don't have time for it, and it takes a lot of effort. So I'd be keen to hear what others had to say too. So kia ora everybody, my name is Bronwen Newcombe. I'm a director at Davenports Law, which is located in Albany, and I'm an employment lawyer and lead the employment law team here too. And I guess what Matt's asked me to talk about is the legalities around hiring and what my observations have been around how to do it right, how to get people, which is Kayleen's job, and then keep people, which is often my job, and how to help employers around that. So I guess the first thing that I would start with is the basic documentation. Kayleen touched on it, and I think it's an absolute fundamental that all business owners should have up-to-date, relevant, compliant and robust employment agreements and like a staff handbook or a policies and procedure manual. So there is a fine, I think it's up to about $20,000 under the Employment Relations Act for an employer who doesn't have a signed written agreement in place with an employee. So there's a strong message from government that it is a crucial document to have at the outset of employment. Certainly from a SME perspective, for those businesses out there who have 19 or fewer employees in their business, it's also really important to have a signed written employment agreement if you want to utilise the trial period. So in order for a trial period to be valid and for you to terminate a new employee's employment within that first 90 days, you have to have a trial period written in the employment agreement. The employment agreement has to be signed prior to that employee commencing work. They must have had a chance to take independent legal advice on that employment agreement, and they must be a new employee. So just a couple of examples on the trial period. If, for example, you had someone working in your accounts department who then switched roles and perhaps went into marketing, they would no longer be an employee, a new employee, when they started that marketing new role. So you couldn't have a trial period when they switched from accounts to marketing. What the law would say to you is that you should have had a pretty good idea by that stage of what the employee is like and whether you'd want them to be in the business and whether they're suitable for that role. There was also a case, Smith and Pharmacy Limited, I think it was, and in that case it was really clear that you had to have a written employment agreement signed before the commencement start time of that new employee's employment. So for example, if I'm a new employee and I go to my new employer's place of work and it's recorded in my employment agreement that I start work at 8:30 in the morning, if I come along and sign my employment agreement at 9 o'clock on that day, pass it over to the employer, the trial period is no longer valid because by 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm already an employee. I'm no longer a new employee. So I would have had to have signed the employment agreement prior to 8:30 that morning. So my advice to small businesses with 19 or fewer staff is always to get that signed written employment agreement in your hand prior to that person starting work that day. There have also been significant employment law changes over the last 18 months. And so your employment agreement and your staff handbook or policies and procedures manual should be updated to reflect those changes. I thought I might just rattle through some of those changes now to bring everybody up to speed so that you've got an awareness of the changes that have happened. Certainly every time there's a change in government, a whole suite of employment law changes follow, and the last couple of years have been no exception to that. The most recent one actually is around sick leave. So about 3 days ago, the sick leave amendment bill received royal assent. And what that means is from the 25th of July, all employees will now be entitled to 10 days sick leave entitlement, whereas prior to that it was 5 days. So that's the most recent change that'll apply to all employees. Currently, there is still that 6-month stand-down period for new employees coming into the business, but that stand-down period is also being looked at by the government, and that may be gone by the end of the year too. Other recent changes include in relation to the privacy laws. So in New Zealand, there was a whole new Privacy Act put in place from 1 December last year, which completely repealed the previous privacy laws. There are quite a few changes in the Privacy Act, but a particular one from an HR perspective is that no longer can I, as an employer, withhold what's called evaluative HR material from an employee. So what does that mean? Well, it means that any employee can make a Privacy Act request, requesting all personal information that I, as their employer, have about them, and they're entitled to see it. But in the past, as an employer, I may have been able to withhold perhaps performance review notes that I might have made about the employee or performance appraisal notes because I had the entitlement to withhold it as the employer. It's now really clear under the new laws that that's not the case. And so from an employment perspective, employers need to make sure that any notes they're taking at a performance review meeting, performance appraisal meeting, need to be really factual. There should not be any opinion about the employee that they wouldn't be prepared to show the employee. So that's a big change around privacy and HR. There was another change a couple of months ago around bereavement leave, where employees who suffer a miscarriage or stillbirth are entitled now to bereavement leave. It's sort of appalling from my personal perspective that previously wasn't the case, that they didn't qualify as being able to access bereavement leave. But it's really good now that that's really clear and that is now part of a bereavement leave entitlement. A few other changes. The minimum wage increased 1 April from $18.90 per hour up to $20 an hour. So that's the current adult minimum wage, which goes up every year usually on the 1st of April. And as Kayleen talked about, there's a big change in the immigration space, where previously accreditation for employers was voluntary, but now it's absolutely mandatory, and there's a whole shift in that space around how employment laws dovetail into immigration laws. Of particular note, if there are people on this session who do employ migrants and need to become accredited, one of the very first things you'll need to do is make sure your employment agreement, your policy and procedure manual, or your staff handbook are up to date, compliant and robust. So you have to show that to Immigration New Zealand in order to tick their check boxes around whether you're an employer who can become accredited. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was paid parental leave payments have extended as well. So that was from July the 1st last year. It's gone from 22 weeks of government paid parental leave to now 26 weeks, which is great. New Zealand's been far behind lots of other OECD countries as to how the government supports people when they're on parental leave. And it's great that that's gone from, I think it was 13 weeks up to 26 weeks over a couple of year period. So those are some recent changes that I wanted to communicate to get everybody up to speed in the employment law space. There are a couple more planned for the end of the year, particularly around the Holidays Act, which is going through a huge overhaul. It's one of the most complicated pieces of legislation that I've ever come across. And there's been a lot of case law of issues between employers and employees going up to the Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, around things like commission and holiday pay. So hopefully the new laws in that area will clarify that. From a hire right perspective, and once you've got the right candidate for the job and they've come into the business, everything's going well, there's no need to utilise the trial period. One of the biggest and most successful tools that I've seen employers utilise is putting in place coaching. And so gone are the days that annual performance appraisals are useful. There's a significant amount of research out there that says it's not useful. It's not useful from a business's perspective in terms of the time and cost it can take a manager to do annual performance reviews. It's also not useful from an employee's perspective. Most employees find those processes really stressful. They don't particularly get much out of it. They don't feel empowered to know what the hurdles or barriers are that are in the business to stop them from achieving their full potential. And the research also says that we need to move away from those stagnant annual meetings to a more agile one-to-one coaching situation between the two parties. And so what those one-to-one coaching sessions look like is having, probably on a 4 to 6 weekly basis, a catch-up between the manager and the employee. There could be an action plan around developmental and training points, and it's a regular touch base between the two parties to talk about, how things are going. What are you enjoying about your job? What are you finding difficult? Are there technology issues we need to overcome? And it's a chance to deal with things in quite real time rather than waiting for the annual meeting where you then get to talk about things that perhaps have been bothering you for the last 365 days. I attended a couple of days ago the Hayes recruitment survey feedback session. And so Hayes are obviously an extremely big recruitment company, wouldn't have the services that a recruitment company like Kayleen's Ripple would be able to provide, but it's useful from a data perspective. And so I found the data and the feedback from their thousands of companies over New Zealand and Australia really, really useful. And so the top 3 things that employees are looking for in a business other than pay are flexibility, career progression, and training and development. And so having a really clear sense as an employer as to how you're going to cover those off is critical, in my view. Critical to not waste the time and energy and investment you've put into getting the right person into the job. Critical from a cost perspective, and critical from a cultural perspective. You know, it's not rocket science that a business that has significant turnover creates a culture of uncertainty and stress, and an environment that has stability creates the opposite. From my perspective, having those one-to-ones in place do cover off certainly the career progression and training and development. And if anybody does want to see what a template action plan around those one-to-ones look like, I'd be happy to send it through a template for you to look at, obviously no charge, as a way to get people going and get these one-to-ones in place. They're not hard to do. They can feel a bit daunting as to how to start and how to get them off the ground. But all you need is a little push to get going, and then you'll be fine. They're an easy tool to get really, really quick results. The third point from that Hayes survey was around flexibility. And I think COVID has pushed everybody into the sphere of being more flexible, which I think is great. You know, we've got tools like AirMeet, Zoom, Teams that create a different way of a business being able to operate. And it also, for most employees who would like to have some level of flexibility, it sort of justified it in a way because everybody was able to get on and do it last year. Productivity, when businesses could be productive, didn't seem to fall. And so there's a real opportunity to allow that flexibility, and employees are demanding it. What I would say about flexibility is if you are willing to look at it, certainly have a policy in place which sets the scene around the business's expectations, what to do if it's not working. It's not an entitlement, it's a privilege, and what an employee needs to consider and do if they are, enjoying the privilege of having a working from home arrangement. There are also health and safety considerations that the business is required to take into account around that working from home and around how far their health and safety obligations reach into that person's home life, workplace. So I just suggest making sure you've got a policy to cover those off. So I guess those are the things I wanted to cover off. Just to recap, my top tips are documentation, number 1. Make sure you've got up-to-date employment agreements, policies. If you're someone who's on this session and does need some help with that, I'm very happy and able to help. Second thing is make sure you put one-to-ones in place. They're a low cost, no cost tool and technique that's following all of the HR trends to get success and productivity and engagement and culture within your workplace. And my third thing is to think about the 3 areas that employees are demanding in a workplace other than pay. And the 3 things are flexibility, career progression, and training and development. And make sure you've covered them off as a business owner and employer. Thanks so much, Matt. I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you. That was very insightful. I didn't actually know about the work from home and that aspect of it, so that's something I'm going to have to look at personally. We do have a few questions, but before I jump into those, you did mention that if that you've got the one-on-one template that you can send out to people. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you to get that?
Yep, no problem at all. So my email address is Bronwen, BRONWEN, @davenportslaw.co.nz, or you could just Google the website and you'll find me on there.
Perfect, thank you. So, Yeah, there seems to be a few questions here. There's one that you could probably answer here, which is, how does the new Privacy Act 2020 impact reference checking of candidates?
Oh, great question. Reference checking, that's so interesting. And it also makes me think of the privacy laws and how they react or relate to interview processes too, when someone's perhaps an employer is wanting to know personal information about an interviewing candidate. But just to go back to the reference checking, as a referee, you're required to be honest. So sometimes you're getting a referee who's an ex-employer and they are required to tell the truth. So they can't lie. Perhaps if there was a dispute between an employee and an employer, the employer has to tell the truth. But in terms of privacy, I guess, if you've given your informed consent and authorization for the new employer to contact the previous employer, then there's pretty much no problem. If the person who the information is about, so the new candidate, has given authorization, then there's really no problem.
Okay. And then we've got another one that's pretty much for you. What is the best way for SMEs to keep basically on top of or abreast of new legislation?
I would sign up to our newsletter. So that's a really easy way. So I guess my job as an employment lawyer is to be all over that. And we regularly provide updates to our clients, and that's no cost. So again, if someone's able to email me, then I can just subscribe them to our newsletter, and then you'll get all of the employment law and business law updates.
Perfect. And another one here. Is there a pattern of employment law grievances that come across your desk?
Yeah, there is. At the moment, I would say there's a lot more misconduct and serious misconduct than perhaps last year. And, I wonder if that's a reaction to the stresses of individuals on the back of 2020. So I've noticed that. There's also an increase in workplace bullying claims. And in my view, as the landscape and the community and the culture, I guess, of humanity move to a place where, we're in the Me Too movement, perhaps behaviour that used to be not spoken of or was acceptable in the past is being called out. And that's no different from a workplace situation. And so there's more people who are standing up to behaviour that's not acceptable, that does meet the threshold of workplace bullying. So those are the two areas that come to mind, as well as restructures, unfortunately. So there were quite a few on the back of COVID, but I'm hoping that slowed down a little bit.
Yeah, I imagine that was a pretty common one. The last question is actually specifically for Kayleen. If you're able to answer it, then great. If not, we'll get an answer done for you and sent out via email. But the question is access to the ADM for the purpose of the recruitment project alone or also beyond? And yeah, it does look like Kayleen is still having some technical issues, so we'll send out a response via email for that one. But all this will be saved as a video on demand file and put up on the Silverdale Business website. So before we go, I'd just like to quickly thank both Business Whangaparoa and Destination Oriole Beach for helping make this a reality, and also promoting it via their email lists and everything, and getting the word out. So it is it's the second after yesterday's one of many to come. The next one, I will actually be hosting that myself, and it will be around social media marketing. So that is looking at how you can get the most out of any effort that you put into your own social media. And that is effectively what I do for a living. So stay tuned for that one. You'll get some more information as soon as it becomes available and we finalize a date and time. But in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with either Kayleen or Bronwen, then by all means do so. They know what they're talking about, so you won't be put wrong. Or jump onto the Silverdale Business website, and there will be some more information about upcoming events and so forth on there as well. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody.